Hey, happy Tuesday. We are back with another episode of Go FUD Yourself. Apologies for anybody that showed up yesterday. It was a holiday. It was a holiday in North America, both Canada and the US, which is where Kiara and I both reside. So we were off. I was actually watching my kids play hockey. So apologies, but we do have our kind of weekly roundup, weekend roundup, and we have a special guest today. So Mr. Sebastian from Outsiders Law, a good friend of ours. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing awesome. How about you?
Amazing. Thank you. It's a beautiful day here in Miami. So definitely can't complain. So Sebastian, just before we get going, maybe you can give our people that aren't familiar with you a quick blurb. Who are you? What's Outsiders Law? And we can go from there.
Sure. Actually, so two things. I run Outsiders Law because I'm a lawyer here in Canada, but also I run a Bitcoin mining company.
Okay.
Together, it's a private company, so that's one of my ties to the space. By way of background, I've been practicing law since 2007, and I've been in the crypto space, advising clients since early 2018.
Oh wow, awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had been in the space that long, so that's exciting. So today we're going to talk a lot about stuff that feels like we brought Sebastian on because he's a lawyer, but it's just because there's a lot of stuff with the SEC and court cases and all this other stuff. So we'll talk about it, but just a note, of course, none of this is legal advice from either myself or Sebastian, who's an attorney or a lawyer in Canada. Obviously, this is an opinion show. We're just giving our thoughts. It's definitely not advice. So quick disclaimer, a reminder for everybody, it's a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We are here every bloody day except for major holidays. I think we've had 2 or 3 days that we have not had a pod on Monday to Friday since we started. And we're probably north of 150 episodes already. So super excited about that. We don't commercialize this. So like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out, help us get the reach out. We're doing it just as a service for the community and because I think it's fun. And we get to have amazing friends and guests on. So here we are. All right. Without any more delays. Oh, crap. A quick shout out to our friends at DDob for the merch today. This is the only type of thing that we get from doing the episodes is we get merch and then we rep it on the show. So DDob is a security firm. They're great. If you need smart contract security, check them out. Good friends of ours. We've used them a lot. All right, let's freaking go. All right, now that we got our little dance out and all that stuff, we can get right into it. We're a little bit late, so we're going to run over a little bit today for anybody watching live, but we will do our best to fill you in. Okay, so first, I don't know if you guys have been hearing about this. I've been talking about this for a while. Crypto casinos are an interest. It makes sense why casinos proliferate in the space, especially when there's somewhat of a lack of regulation, for lack of a better phrase, I suppose. And I've been saying this, that often the people that are willing to do these casino type things, I mean, you wouldn't dare if you lived in North America, launch an unregulated casino. But anyways, so often, you should be a little skeptical of this stuff. Of course, do your research and make sure you understand. Even with all the research doesn't mean you can avoid these types of things. But there was, over the weekend, there was a fairly substantial exploit that hit Stake, which is a crypto casino on Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, and Polygon, I think. Anyways, there's a total of almost $40 million that was swiped off of this. It was a private key issue, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, this is just one of those things that keeps happening. I mean, in 2023, exploits have been down Q1 23, at least that's the report that we're currently talking about. Exploits were down substantially from previous years. I've explained why I think that is. The number of exploits and the number of tokens taken probably isn't down. Just the value of those tokens, because we're at the depths of a bear market, is substantially less. all of this to say, my friend, I think that regulation is going to, help bring up that minimum acceptable standard, and there will be a little bit more accountability for these people. As a lawyer, of course, not looking for a legal opinion on this, but what are your thoughts? How do you see industries from the legal side of things as they mature? What do you normally see in terms of more of these consumer protections, more robust security, and so on?
Well, I think this is pretty much the standard progression of how industries move, right? I mean, I've been in the tech space since '99. I watched as when initially we had the introduction of voice over IP. So I'm aging myself here, just to sort of prove a point. Voice over IP came along, and there were all kinds of issues with security and keeping communications between parties private. And while there was a big attack on the internet, basically the industry that was really pushing this from all the telecoms at the time, saying, we need to regulate this industry. We need to make sure that people's data is protected and kept private. And yeah, I think as time goes on, it becomes a pretty natural progression that we have standards that come into place and rules that come into place. They protect the customers. They protect people that use the products. So
yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I think in this industry, I think more so than anywhere else, there's been very little personal accountability, except for recently the SBF thing and Do Kwon and a few others. Do you remember? What's his name? There was that guy that was doing like $200 or $300 million exploits recently. His name started with an A. He was just arrested by American authorities also. Abraham, some Abraham guy that was exploiting all these protocols, and somehow he was coming to the protocols with like $300 million in assets and like using that to exploit it. Anyways, I digress.
It's a good point. It has been hard to, or at least there has been very limited accountability in this space. I think one of the lies we tell ourselves as like members of the space is, well, it's all decentralized. That's why there's no accountability. But let's be honest, like every one of these chains is started by someone. Right. Every project is started by someone, some group. There is a point of failure with pretty much everything other than Bitcoin, right? Because there is a group. Even if you look at Ethereum, right? You can go to the Ethereum Foundation. You got Vitalik. We know where the buck stops. Yeah. And I think regulators have just been scared to go after these people because I really think it's historically been a lack of understanding of how the tech works and what the real progression through the process is. And I think finally now we've got regulators that realize that this industry is not going away, and they need to start understanding. We saw that in the last couple of years. We saw this out of the Senate actually getting education from the crypto industry so that they can better understand the underlying tech that they're trying to regulate.
Yeah. I think, I've been a fairly outspoken proponent of regulation, which is somewhat contrary to many of my peers. I think, and the reason for it isn't philosophical, it's practical. And the fact is, I believe that the vast majority of the participants of this space currently are our innovators and early adopters as a part of that adoption curve. And what we're all talking about is mass adoption, and that is the middle of the curve, the fat part of the majority of society. And it turns out that the majority of society loves it when they have someone to blame when something goes wrong. And so without structures like that in place and regulatorily required compliance, it's just a Wild West. And for that reason, I think we see a lot of things. Yes, some of this stuff is unavoidable because it's a new technology and there's some unconscious incompetence, I think, in risk vectors. But there's a lot of stuff that could be avoided. And I think there's a lot of, I'm going to use the word negligence. I don't mean it in its exact legal tense, but I believe there's been a good amount of negligence on behalf of entrepreneurs in the space. Nonetheless, we'll move on. Go ahead.
I just want to say, you're hesitant to use the term negligence. I think it's gross negligence, right? I've had enough conversations with potential clients that have come to me and have said, "Hey, I have this project," and I go, "Okay, well, why does this need to be on a blockchain?" We have this conversation all the time, and well, the answer is, and I think again, even when you go back to them and you say, "Hey, like this makes more sense on an Oracle database. I mean, you guys are running it, you guys are controlling it, you guys are doing all this." They go, "Well, but yeah, the only reason we're doing it is because this is the easiest way to raise money. We wouldn't raise any money if we were doing it on Oracle." Well, that's not negligence. That's that's willful fraud, right? Like, so
they're raising on an inferior product. Yeah. We could spend probably hours debating that, and
on
maybe
that topic. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe we'll have you back to chat about that actually, because that could be quite interesting. But this is something that I think anybody that's been around for a minute, or even new entrants or new observers of the space have found kind of to be an interesting narrative of late. And of course, Grayscale kind of had a somewhat of a win in court last week, I think it was, and more or less what it implied was that the SEC got their hand slapped a little bit by saying, "Listen, you guys actually didn't provide enough information on the denial and then a path to approval, et cetera, et cetera." And so there's a ton of speculation since then that that the federal courts are now going to have to potentially reassess the Grayscale's original spot ETF application that was just denied, instead of waiting for the next one. Now, another implication of this is it could also force the SEC, because they were unclear on the spot ETFs, it could force the SEC to revoke retroactively the license for the futures ETF that they did approve already, which is kind of unfortunate. Have you been paying attention? Have you been paying attention to this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest piece of news in the industry and in the space. I think some of your comments might be a little off, though. I don't think that the courts, again, I'm not a U.S. lawyer. I don't think the courts have the ability to reverse the results of the application, and I don't think they have the ability to reverse any previously approved futures ETFs. What it is I think is the SEC now is in this difficult position. The ruling ultimately says, okay, you guys have to go back and reevaluate this because you did so on like superfluous grounds, right? You approved some futures ETFs, but you didn't approve this one, and we don't like your reasons. And one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up, and I think a lot of people it's been dropped in the narrative, but it was really important back when those futures ETFs were approved. And again, caveat, not a U.S. lawyer, don't know any, and I'm not a securities lawyer. Those are two things I'm not, and I know that this is a big deal. But back in whatever that was, 2021 or 2019, it might have been, when the first futures ETF, it was 2019, 2018 even, was when that first futures ETF was approved. And it was approved under the Securities Investment Act of 1940 or something like that. It was under a different piece of regulation than what all the regular spot ETFs are under. And it's strange because at the time, Gensler had made some comment about how they would be more open to approving a futures ETF because the trading of the ETF itself is regulated, and it has less to do with the underlying asset. I think this Grayscale decision that's come in, they're like, well, that's a garbage position, just because the trading of the shares on the future exchange is regulated doesn't make the underlying asset any more regulated. And so now they have to go back, and now they have to look at it again. So the big topic of conversation I keep hearing from people is like on all these shows, right? Is there's a risk now that the SEC goes back and rejects, overturns these approvals. I'm sure there's a risk. what is the likelihood of that risk? It seems pretty small
Hopefully
to me.
pretty
I
low.
mean,
Yeah.
even during this Grayscale case, when it started to become really clear, it's been clear for months that Grayscale was going to win, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's all, the question of priced in and whatever, everybody was waiting for it, but everybody knew what the answer was going to be. So that's why price kind of did what it did, but not investment advice. But
we also don't give investment advice on the show.
but June 27th or somewhere around there was when the news came out that the SEC was planning on approving an Ethereum futures ETF. So even though they knew they were probably going to lose this, they didn't seem to demonstrate any interest in slowing down this futures ETF market. In fact, expanding it from just Bitcoin. So my sense is that's a pretty, I don't know what that process looks like, but my God, you have a lot of investors, a lot of dollars going into those futures ETFs. I don't know exactly how you unwind them. I don't know how you compensate all these, and I'm sure they don't compensate the fund managers. But I don't know how you tell them, hey, by the way, you have all these issued and outstanding shares, and now you've got to wind this thing up. And I don't know what the precedent is.
I think that's probably pretty unlikely. Also,
right.
The articles, though, are claiming, and that's where a lot of this speculation has been going on crypto Twitter. And I think I'm glad we addressed it, and I'm glad that you spoke against its likeliness, because, I mean, that seems to be where everybody's paying attention. Oh, they're going to cancel these futures ETFs. No, I don't think they will. They can, in theory. That's at least what's been reported. But practically, I think it's going to be a big challenge.
I agree.
I'm excited for, I think of all of this, the reason that this excites me is I think what should be the result of this is not actually the SEC changing course or industry changing course. Rather, Congress should be looking at this going, okay, we're running into this weird thing now where the courts are a little bit unclear, industry is unclear, the SEC has been incredibly unclear. We need to provide legislation to meaningfully influence this. And I think we're going to see some of that. The Stablecoin Act, the FIT, I think it's called FIT. They're negotiating that with the White House right now because they seem to be pretty far apart. But there is, in fact, the McHenry bill, which will be most likely tagged on to the government funding omnibus, which is usually how these things go, which they're saying now will be pushed off to potentially October, November. So we'll see. I'm hopeful that we'll have some version of regulatory clarity by the end of the year, but I've been saying that for quite some time, so I guess we'll find out. One kind of final thought, I guess, on this a little bit is the fact that what they're saying is that the material risks, and what the judge said was that the material risks, fraud risks, and market volatility risks of a futures ETF are comparable, if not equal, to a spot. And that's actually what this case hinged on, as far as I understand, was that they were saying, hey, you approved this one with this guidance, you denied this one with this guidance, yet they're pretty much the same. And so, I mean, hopefully this just highlights, maybe that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to highlight it for lawmakers. Listen to the damn podcast. Let's get this show on the road so we can stop talking about it every single day.
You're bang on.
Any final thoughts?
The underlying asset is the same. Yeah. Whether it's direct investment in the asset or some futures based investment in the asset, it's the underlying asset's the same. So the risks are the same, the manipulation is the same.
Yeah. It's all influenced. It's all influenced by the same market prices. So I mean, anyways, we can probably shit on that decision or shit on their at least opinion on that all day long. But this was kind of interesting. That was a horrible transition, but this is kind of interesting. There's a lot of the space is in Korea this week for Korean Blockchain Week. And then next week is Token 2049 in Singapore. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be there. This will be the last one that I miss. But I cannot go to Singapore this time. But I thought this was interesting because we've been talking a lot lately about some rulings, or at least some legislation in Singapore that made it noticeably more friendly both to crypto businesses and to their population being exposed to crypto. Not super comprehensive, but they were taking steps in the right direction. Now, I believe over the weekend, or it might have been yesterday, the former finance minister and central bank chairman has now become the president of Singapore. And he got a massive share of the vote, 70%, which is pretty crazy for any major country. But why this is weird is he is a very outspoken opponent to crypto. So this could be interesting to see what happens. He's got a ton of financial experience and so on. Have you read anything about this, Sebastian?
Yeah, I mean, I've read a little bit about it. I don't know much. I know he's quoted as saying that crypto is inherently purely speculative and in fact slightly crazy. And you know what? Like, I'm not totally in disagreement with that characterization, right? Like, there's a lot of speculation as to as to where the technology is going and how it's going to be used. And really, again, you can tell I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm wearing my undercover Satoshi Nakamoto first block mine shirt, and I got my Bitcoin under construction piece of art behind me. But like, Bitcoin even is speculative, right? It has characteristics that make it a worthwhile and interesting speculation, but it is speculative as it continues to adopt. Even gold is speculative, right? So it's
so are currencies in many ways,
right. Absolutely, it's a very valid point. And the further you get away from Bitcoin, the more slightly crazy and more crazy you get, right? Like, when you're investing in Thorchain, you're going, okay, like, I don't really understand how this works. I don't really understand what it does. Hopefully it takes off, right?
There's a name I haven't heard for a minute, Thorchain. Before we move on from this one, we don't need to spend a ton of time, but once we drill down a little bit from the headline, which is how I opened the topic, on the surface, it seems like he's been a significant critic against crypto. I actually think he's just been objectively analyzing crypto in many ways. Yeah, maybe there's a little hyperbole in it being all crazy and completely ludicrous, speculation all the time. Yeah, the max drawdown is higher, max volatility is higher than most other asset classes. Of course, it is in fact a budding but emerging ecosystem. And so I don't think he's actually that incorrect. What really will be interesting to see is now, if he has these opinions, is he going to move quickly to implement legislation that reflects them? And I would be supportive of that. Again, I've said all along, we're not necessarily as entrepreneurs going to like the regulation that we get. Most likely we'll hate it. But in my opinion, it's necessary. We have to have regulation to take the next meaningful step forward as a space. And so let's just get it over with, get some regulation out, and then we at least have something to debate, as opposed to this kind of perpetual state of limbo. So I don't know. Hopefully we see him. Hopefully we see him do something interesting in Singapore. I guess I'm trying to dispel a little bit of the FUD. It's not all bad news. I think he's just been a fairly objective critic in general, but I don't think it's too FUDdy. Any final thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, I have a question.
Sure.
Is he not? I don't know that much about him, right? I don't follow Singapore news that closely, but I think he understands that digital currencies, not necessarily decentralized ones, but digital currencies are disrupting. They're disrupting everything, and I think his view is that if Singapore doesn't take some steps to become like a leader in this space, the private currencies will ultimately disrupt the existing banking system.
Yeah, I think that's we're going to actually talk about that. That's a really good segue into one of our next topics. But we're going to skip over Australia today. We'll probably bring that one later in the week. But I mean, yeah, he used to be their central bank. he used to run the central bank in Singapore. So I mean, his experience and understanding of monetary policy is probably extensive. But as we know, sometimes you can have blinders when you've worked in that vertical for so long. It's the only thing that works is government monetary policy and our ability to manipulate our own currency. We don't want anybody else to have that luxury, and so on and so forth. So I've been very outspoken against CBDCs because of the slippery slope and the tendency for when power is accessible, it will be taken. And so hopefully they figure it out. You're right. He has talked a lot about stablecoins and understanding how to regulate stablecoins before it gets out of control, before there's so many of these algo stables and all this weird shit that's happening that they just don't have any way to regulate or control, at least currently.
Right.
So hopefully we'll see something. But coming back to your kind of digital currency comment, which was very timely, and this will have to be the actually we have two more topics for today, so this will be the second last one. But the European Central Bank is now backing the digital euro. They're saying, the digital euro is a good idea. I completely disagree, and I'll share my thoughts after, but I'll let you talk first. I think essentially what they're saying is that the EU has been making some proposals now about creating essentially a CBDC, a digital euro, which is the euro controlled by monetary policy, owned and operated by the EU, the government, which again, I think you can tell by my smirk how I feel about this. But he has been talking about right now, and I've been saying this forever, as soon as the US weaponized SWIFT, we're going to see the rest of the world saying, I don't know if we like having a single vendor for international payment infrastructure. Like it kind of doesn't make sense, especially if it's going to be used for geopolitical strategy, I guess. And that's what we've seen happen. And the EU, I thought this was kind of surprising that the EU came out with this as their kind of highlight reason for following this. But, Macron has been fairly outspoken in, setting up relationships with China and Russia and so on. He was over in China not that long ago, right in the middle of the US in a trade war with China. So anyways, all of this to say, I think that even though the EU isn't being sanctioned meaningfully by SWIFT or by the US yet, I think they see that they could be. And the way that it's all played out with Russia and Ukraine and all of this going on, I think people are just saying, okay, that's why we saw BRICS. That's why we're seeing, all of these CBDCs pop up. How do you feel about this? Are you a fan of CBDCs, Sebastian?
Well,
that was a loaded question.
Yeah. No, I'm not a fan, obviously. And I'll get to that in a second. But I do think the big driver is less the fear of like sanction through SWIFT for most countries. I think the big driver really is this fear that we have private currencies that are now competing directly with the current local currency on a faster, lower friction backbone. And they're going, well, this is a little bit like Blockbuster trying to defend against Netflix, right? Like, we didn't see this coming. We kind of thought it was going to go away and it was going to fail, and people liked us for all these other reasons. And now we're realizing that's not true. And so now they're coming in and this is the, and then they fight you stage of the battle. And, as a guy who's been in tech and a guy who like really, really follows the progression of these things, when tech comes at you, tech wins. And when decentralization, this is our like more recent in the last 10 years thing, when decentralization comes at you, it generally wins too. So that's that. On the like, am I a fan of CBDCs? These central bank digital currencies represent the highest potential risk of loss of privacy of any technology in the world. I see this, it shows up on my Twitter feed all the time now. Canada does this every time they plan on rolling something out. the Canadian government puts out a poll, and when you read the polls are loaded in how they present things, right? Much like this article. Oh no, it's going to facilitate this and it's going to do that, and we promise you we're not going to. You're going to be able to do off-chain, like or off-network private transactions and that sort of thing. Yeah, and until you have a 9/11, and then all of a sudden you get a whole new heightened set of you go, okay, we got to implement some new rules to protect everybody, and anyone who fights this particular rule is really like they're a terrorist, or they're not good citizens, and that'll become the general narrative. And then you'll wake up 10 years later and you'll realize that 90% of those rules were never repealed, right? And you're still living with them. You're still, so
that's what always.
No, I'm not a fan.
It's like when they build in these crazy spending, oh, it's only a 5-year spend on this. Yeah, right. Like, since when does the government ever cancel any program ever? Like, especially if it gives them more power and control. Again, I am strongly biased to one side of this debate personally, but I'm with you. I think it is the single largest risk. I mean, there's a bit of a red herring in this article too, that he was saying, oh well, we're still going to allow cash-like transaction privacy for certain. Yeah. There's a rule that'll get repealed real quick when they decide they want to. Or that's one of those things that, yeah, the majority of you have that, but you guys, because you're suspected of whatever, you don't get that privacy. And that's kind of what, I don't know. That, to me, I keep using the same phrase, but it's a slippery slope. I mean, I think there's
for sure.
It's going to start small, and then we're going to wake up one day and be like, the hell?
But can I just say though, like, I do think that we in the crypto community seem to think that everyone's going to rise up against this and say, no, my privacy, my freedom is more important. But the reality is, I have a saying, and everyone who's ever worked with me knows that, like, if you're going to roll something out, if you're going to try to get adoption, the best bet is to always bet on lazy. If you bet on people being lazy, then you will find like sort of the fastest path to where things are going. And of course, the number one place that this applies is with your Google login. How many people have like a password keeper thing to protect their 300 passwords and growing every day? Or do they just go, you know what? I'm just going to log in with Google here, right? I'm going to log in with Facebook here, right? Because it's easier, right? And they're tracking everything. So really, like, we all talk about how important our privacy is, but we share our data without thinking about it in an instant. And central banks, I think, are they're counting on that, right? We're gonna choose the path of least resistance.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. But yeah, you're right. I mean, people give away privacy not only to Google, but even with all of your private conversations on WhatsApp and your, all your social media and all of that stuff is being tracked and stored, and in some cases sold, many cases sold. And people don't seem to care that much. I think hopefully over time, society starts to figure this out, that this is quite invasive, but I guess we'll see.
I got a question, quick question for you then.
Let's go.
When you're signing up for one of these platforms and that thing pops up, your click wrapper comes up and it says, and it's like, 15 pages of disclaimers and information and whatever. Like, do you just skip to the bottom or do you read it? Just like,
I don't read it.
Of course.
And I suspect most people don't, generally speaking, because usually at that point, you think there's always this like interesting cognitive dissonance, I think, from this stuff, where you think at the time, I don't do anything that any of these terms and conditions will matter. I'm not going to give a bunch of my information. But then a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, oh shit, I use this service now all day, every day. As an example, Slack. Slack is another technology, great tool, but I've used it for the better part of a decade, since pretty much when it came out. And they have a lot of data and information on me, like conversation history from multiple companies. Like it's kind of crazy. At the time, I thought, oh, it's just a tool I'm using to communicate with this one group. So I didn't, anyways, it's really easy for us to convince ourselves. That's a really good point, actually. We all sign that shit with, not all of us, but most of us sign it without even, it's 400 pages. I'm not reading that. Let me log in. Anyways, okay.
I'm going to use it anyways, right? Like that's,
yeah, doesn't matter.
That's the decision.
I'm not going to redline this and send it back to Google. So either I sign it or I don't use the tool, and I've already decided to use the tool. Anyways, one final thought that I think is kind of laughable. This just goes to show we have a long ways to go here in the space, in my opinion. That one of the, I hesitate to say this, but one of the most prestigious universities in the world, I beg to differ, but the vast majority of the population will suggest that Harvard is one of the most prestigious schools in the world. A researcher there has come out after publishing a paper talking about taxing the metaverse, which I think is hilarious, because at least my understanding of the paper and her position is that she doesn't understand how crypto is already tracked and taxed. And the metaverse is just, in fact, another extension of that. Anyways, this to me was kind of laughable, but here we are. Apparently she's claiming that the metaverse is a tax haven. I'm unclear what metaverse and where there's a tax haven. If there is, let me know. Actually, don't let me know, because I like to stay out of trouble. But this to me just seems like, what the hell is Harvard what are they doing publishing this stuff? Like, do they really understand it? Did you read anything different than I did into this, or kind of what are your thoughts in closing?
So I'm a tax lawyer by background, right?
Okay.
That's where I started. That's where I spent most of my career. I don't necessarily tout myself as one today, but it comes up in everything I do. I read this article. I have not read Kim's paper. So I don't know exactly I don't know if this article is just a really poor extrapolation of her paper. So I want to sort of put that out there. But I have no idea about this Haig-Simmons and Glenshaw Glass definitions. But I do know that everybody everywhere, at least, in Canada's rules are pretty standard. I think the US's are pretty similar from a tax standpoint on this point. You sell a digital asset and you realize a gain or loss. And I don't know that it matters. This argument that in the metaverse, that's different. To your point, it shows a complete lack of understanding. If that is how she has interpreted it, it's certainly not how we're all supposed to self-report. This is like one of the things that, in 2017 and 2018, there was this whole misunderstanding, I think, amongst the community as to what was reportable and what is not reportable. Today, I think everybody understands. I don't know, it's really difficult to track and it's really difficult to calculate. But everybody knows that
what you're supposed to track and calculate.
Every time you sell, you either have a gain or a loss, and that's either, if it's a gain, it's taxable.
Being in crypto is not cheap. My accounting bill just for my crypto taxes every year is like $35,000 just to do my crypto taxes. But the point is, I don't want to end up in shit. And we're gonna have a crypto accountant on one day. So maybe what we'll have to do is have like super big brain day. We'll have you and a crypto accountant on, and we can talk about that stuff. But yeah, this one's interesting. Like every time that I see somebody claim that assets that have appreciated in value but have not been liquidated or moved are somehow taxable every year in their growth, like that doesn't exist anywhere in tax law in most modern jurisdictions. Generally, there has to be some version of what we call, or at least what I call, deemed disposition, what the majority of finance or accounting call deemed disposition. There needs to be some version of liquidation, whatever that is. Sometimes it's transfer of wallets and all this other nonsense. I mean, it's the same shit. To get it to a point where you can actually use it for something, you have to bring it out through off-ramps into fiat, or you have to use crypto point of sale platforms like BitPay and MoonPay and all that other stuff, which are all KYC'd. I mean, they're all regulated. So there's this huge fallacy, in my opinion. And I talk about this a lot on the show, and we'll wrap on this point. But a good friend of ours started Chainalysis. and years ago. And Chainalysis is obviously the industry leader in blockchain forensics and all of this stuff. But I mean, their largest clients are the FBI, DOJ, CIA, DEA. What does that tell you? That tells you that they can pretty much track anything. And to the extent that they're getting massive government contracts, they have a contract with the RCMP in Canada, Calgary Police Service. There's a hub in Western Canada for crypto. I'm from Alberta, by the way, also. So that's how I know. But anyways, I think it's so incredibly difficult, if not near impossible now, which is why I talk about these exploits all the time too. By the time you fence that money out of an exploit, you're maybe 10 cents on the dollar at best. And you have the crypto world chasing you. And there's a lot of less than desirable participants in the crypto space, I'm sure. If you steal their money, they're probably not happy about it. So I don't know. Is it worth it? I don't think so. Can you run and hide your tax issues from the IRS? I don't think so. So this is, to me, a moot point. All right, Sebastian, it's been an absolute blast. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more? What's your Twitter? What's the best way to connect with you?
So yeah, you can find me on Twitter. It's at, well, I'll have to spell it out. Elawny _ law. You can put it in the.
We'll post it under the video. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Elawny _ law. Yeah, obviously you can find me on LinkedIn. I actually don't know what that is. I'll have to give that to you. And outsiders.law is my website, and that has all the links to all my different social media.
Well, it's been a pleasure, man. We will absolutely have you back. I think there's a lot of topics now after this conversation that we could really dig into. For everybody that's watching, another reminder: we're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Please help us get the word out. Like, share, subscribe. If you're on Twitter, please bookmark us. That really helps with reach. Super, super important. And with that, today I say to you, Sebastian, go FUD yourself. Have a great day, man.
Thanks a lot. You too.